All righty. Well, thank you, Glenn, for coming today. So we're going to kind of hear about your career in data and analytics. Would that be a good way to categorize kind of your career, analytics, Glenn?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, if you could just maybe, start us off with kind of giving us your name, your job title, and just kind of where you're from, general background, please.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Glenn Doherty. I am a senior manager of business intelligence with Providence Health. I live in the Pacific Northwest and have been working with Providence Health specifically for about 8 years now. I've got a total of about 15, 20 years working in healthcare in one shape or another, using data and analytics to help solve problems and answer questions.
Well, this is exciting because I think you're the first kind of data person in healthcare on our channel. So I hope we'll get to learn a lot about that. And in order to kind of get to where you are as a senior manager within Providence, could you elaborate a little bit on your educational background?
Yeah, for sure. I have my undergrad in psychology. I got that over in Rhode Island College out up in the Northeast,
Mhm.
and my master's degree is in public health with a focus on health management from San Diego State. Both of those fields are very data driven, and I did a lot of research involving psychology, behavioral research before I started focusing on health management.
When you started learning about psychology at Rhode Island and kind of public health, I'm sure there was a lot of options available for you in terms of what you wanted to do with your career. But was there a particular reason or a culmination of experiences that led you to kind of going into that data analytics path?
Yeah, the data and analytics path kind of emerged over time, kind of evolved. There was no clear path. What my experience has mostly been was just what I call following the affinity. I found that in a lot of the experiences that I was getting, I was just I had a knack for data and analytics, and it just made sense to me. The way that you can apply that is just all over the board. And so throughout my own development, I've also done a lot of soul searching about what's important to me, what really matters, and have found ways to not necessarily just go with the flow, but start directing my type of work towards things that really matter to me.
Hmm. When you talk about kind of things that really matter to you, is that kind of about making sure that the data insights that you gain really help people, or like what is the thing that kind of drives you there?
Yeah, yeah, that reminds me of an experience that I had once while I was doing some qualitative research for a program that provides navigation for patients that are needing cancer support. And you may or may not know, when people from low socioeconomic status backgrounds have a chronic illness, getting access to healthcare as well as all the logistics involved in that, it's a
Mm.
lot to manage, especially when you're sick, right? And one of the organizations I was doing a analysis for, we were evaluating how effective their navigation program was for their cancer services. They asked me to do quantitative and qualitative analysis about how effective they were in helping these patients that needed their help.
Mhm.
And I was doing an interview with somebody in particularly, and the interview lasted about 45 minutes. The patient was receiving all these services, and she was pretty happy. The program was working, but
Yeah.
then at the end of the program, she asked me. I asked her. I said, "Is there anything else I could do for you?" I mean, we built a pretty good relationship over the hour, and she says, "You know, my husband passed away a few years ago. My son is living in another state. I'm
Mhm.
dealing with this cancer, and it's a lot,
Yeah.
and it makes the skin on my back dry off and dry up and flake off, and it gets really itchy." And
Sure.
she says, "You know, I sometimes I just wish I had somebody to help me scratch my back."
Yeah.
and,
Okay.
and I was sitting on the phone and I heard this and I was like, wow, that impacted me so deeply,
Huh.
right? And it's really fascinating to me that I responded so strongly to that, and it stuck with me for about 20 years, Joe. And part of the reason why it stuck with me is because that's who I am. I want to help people.
Yeah.
And one thing about data and analytics is it can separate you from who you're trying to impact. And at that moment, what I realized is that my data and analytics work is actually the tool that I use to help them.
Right.
And by doing the work that I do, I'm actually having a direct impact on the people that I really care about that are suffering out in the community. And that's been the central point, kind of the North Star of my work, and the following experiences that I've had ever since, to make sure that my work is actually bringing it back to the patient, not necessarily towards the organizations that I provide services to.
Right, right. And just listening to you, I feel like you are so healthcare. And what I mean by that
Yeah.
is, to your point about how sometimes data can make us separate from like what we're actually trying to do. It's healthcare, I think, is unique in that we're able to really be there for the patients, which in turn actually help the organization rather than thinking about the organization and then as a byproduct helping people. So
Yeah, yeah, certainly. That mission and that purpose of helping people, not only to the patient, but a lot of the people that I work with, that I'm doing analytics for and building products for, I'm helping them too. And I end up freeing up hours and hours of caregiver time. And I'm not sure if you know this right now, Joe, but we are in a staffing crisis. Our nurses are overworked, our physicians are underpaid, and there's just a lot of stuff going on. And I strongly believe that data and analytics can actually make life better, not only for the people that are providing services to our patients, but also for our patients at the end. And so I get the luxury of helping everybody involved. And my motto that keeps me going from day to day is that I help people that help people. Yeah.
that's really awesome. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Like, so what does it look like to help people that help people on a day-to-day basis? So, are you always on the phone interviewing people like you were talking about with that one story? Are you in front of the computer? What does, Glenn's day look like usually?
Yeah, yeah. Every day's an adventure. I really don't know what I'm going to experience, and that's part of the reason why I love data and analytics. I think there's this perception that data and analytics is really, you're lost in computers. But
Mm,
what I found from day to day is that I'm actually interacting with a wide range of people with a wide range of skill sets and strengths and weaknesses, and each one of them needs something different, and I could help them with data and analytics. It seems like it all comes back. That's the meeting ground, is data and analytics needs. And so throughout the majority of the day, I may be interfacing with different leaders inside my organization,
mhm.
and they may have a problem. They say, "Hey, Glenn, um, I need to figure out how long patients are waiting to get access to healthcare services after they make an appointment." And
Right.
I could say, okay, well, let me go back to the data, let me figure that out. And I could come back to them and say, well, this is what the data is looking like. Is this something you're going to need to manage long term, or is this something that you just need to answer the question to? And
Mhm.
then they'll respond to something like that, and I'll go back, and as we discover what the barriers to access for these patients are, I get to not only interact with different people in the organization to help solve the problems that they're trying to solve with data, but I also get a very wide understanding of how the business moves and operates, and how we could ultimately help that patient. There's other And so I would probably say about 60-70% of my time, I'm actually working with people to help
Mm,
define problems, solve problems. And what
right.
I do is take the data and apply that back to their problems, and then have more great discussions down the road. And so it's really in healthy working opportunities with different leaders. It's a collaboration and a co-development and a co-building about how to make our organization better and stronger and faster. And a lot of that is really through relationships and collaboration before data and analytics.
I think that's actually really new for me because I had a bias when I hear the phrase data analytics that you're in front of the computer doing, all these analyses, for at least 80% of your time. But what you're saying is actually most of the time is through conversation, collaboration, and working with people. And then some of that time is, doing that kind of data analytics through, a computer. Am I hearing you correctly there, or not so?
Certainly, yeah, and yeah, there's a lot to manage there because there's a substantial amount of computer work, and that's where my skill set lies. That's where I'm bringing value back to the organization and to the people that I'm working with my skill set with data. But more often than not, what I'm also supporting these leaderships and this leadership in doing is translating my skill set and my tools back to actionable opportunities inside the organization. And that to me is what's really inspiring.
When you kind of go through that life cycle of like defining the problem, then coming up with a solution and then proposing that solution, what are the skills that are required to like be successful at what you do? Is it this love for data? Is it the love for people? All the above? Like what do you think is important for one to be successful?
Yeah, certainly. I really think it's all of the above. I think an under valued skill with data and analytics is your ability to communicate and work with other people. I think that's an extremely valuable skill. And we as data and coders and programmers have a tendency to just go back to computers because it's very safe.
Mhm,
And one thing that I've had to focus on in my development is to always make sure that I'm not getting too comfortable with the code and
mhm,
always putting myself back into making it applicable back to people where things are not as pretty and predictable and
yeah,
there's less comfort. I believe that that's probably the most important and valuable skill that a data engineer and analyst could have is staying relevant to
mhm,
the people that we're serving. But then there's also all the technical side, which a lot of people know a little bit more about. I've learned how to code. I code SQL and I use R programming and there's some HTML in there. And I've built all these skill sets so that I could be a better service to the people that I'm working for. But however, I always make sure that it's for the people, not necessarily for me to feel safe and confident and strong with my skill set, but
mhm,
more as a opportunity to learn a new skill set to deliver more value to the people that I'm working with. There's also a need and a desire to learn about systems and how everything works and comes together. I see a lot of people doing data for the sake of data, but it doesn't necessarily drive things to where they want to go.
mhm,
And so another really valuable skill that I recommend is as people are getting into data and analytics, not to just focus on the technical and the data side,
mhm,
which is growing really fast. You could commit your whole life to being an expert in data, but
uh-huh,
you could also find yourself at the end of that life really not being applicable to the real world and what's happening because the world doesn't move as fast as data is moving right now.
mhm,
So the more that you could put yourself into a position of a translator from the technical world and the analytic statistics and all that other really weird type of world that most people don't live in. And the more you could take that and make it applicable to where
mhm.
people are at and where they're going, I think the more value you bring as a professional. Yeah.
Um, I imagine that the technical skills that you develop come a lot from formal education like certificates or higher ed, etc. When it comes to being able to communicate with others and the ability to have a systems thinking of kind of making sure you understand how everything works, does that come from experience, informal mentoring, like, or YouTube videos? How
Yeah.
does one
Yeah.
kind of develop that usually? Or, what has your experience been?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I believe it was one part just who I am, my personality. But one of the first jobs that I was working in doing HIV research with African American adolescents that are at high risk, I was a lead research associate that was providing a program around behavioral modification for high risk sexual behaviors. And one thing that I liked the most about it was seeing how everything worked, right? And so it wasn't just the data collection and the analytics piece, and it wasn't just the workshops piece. It was actually how everything came together, and we produced research papers out of that, and actually changed people's behavior.
Wow.
I think that's a personality type thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then I also recognize that the aspects of my personality are um, also skills that we can refine in
Mhm.
our own development. I think humility and curiosity and the desire to learn more will only expand by nature, only expand our breadth in our understanding of the world that we live in, and
Mhm.
make ultimately make it more applicable back towards a data and analytics role, like I just described. I've sought out mentors. I am less of a fan of structured institutes of education, and I'm more of a fan of relationship building, experience, and getting exposure to different parts of the world. And I think with the exposure and applying new tools, that's actually how we expand and get a better systems understanding of things. We could
Right.
talk about it theoretically in our minds until the day's over. And to be
Sure.
honest with you, Joe, I'd actually like to do that with you. I'd love talking about this stuff. But
Yeah.
then I also realized that um, we have a risk of getting too caught up in the head with new facts and the way things are, you know, the way things actually are from an intellectual perspective. And
Right.
what I believe we need to do is kind of separate ourselves or devalue that a little bit and put more effort and time into our actual experience of the things that we're going through from day to day, because I believe that it's actually in the experience of it that we truly grow and develop. And if we aren't applying, and if we aren't getting real world experience, and if we aren't getting outside of the textbooks, then it's just all up here and it's not down here. Yeah.
Makes so much sense. The phrase that comes into my mind when I listen to you is you can only learn so much from a book.
Yeah.
Books are
Yeah.
good, but it's not the end all be all. And this happens with every conversation I have. Like, I feel like, okay, I need to like second guess my career now. I'm going to data analytics. And I'm curious, are there challenges to your career, like, or have you experienced like, these are kind of the things that high school students should watch out for and have like a little reality check when thinking about data analytics, or is it all, rainbows and roses and everything is good? Any thoughts
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, certainly. And really our experience is what we bring to it. But from a general kind of experiential perspective,
Mhm.
we've already talked a little bit about that tendency to want to just go into the computer and kind of shut off the rest of the world.
Right.
I think that's a real risk for us, and especially the new generations that are coming up with such a focus on digital and artificial realities and augmented realities and all this other stuff. I think that stuff is really what I think we really have a risk of doing is disconnecting ourselves from each other.
Mhm.
And when we're talking about working with large organizations are actually just groups of individuals that are just like you and me, that have their own kind of wishes and problems that they're dealing with. And if we're not able to deal with that in real life, if we're putting ourselves too much into the computer and not remembering that Joe is in fact a real person with real feelings and with real history and with something to teach me, I fear that our evolution is going to slow down pretty dramatically. It's what makes us human. So one of the first things that comes to mind in terms of watching out for is not allow ourselves to get too comfortable in the digital world,
Mhm.
to be able to learn how to kind of shut that off and put ourselves back in uncomfortable situations to experience the humanity of who we are first and foremost. And then everything else that we do in the digital world should be a tool to advance humanity. It's not a tool to escape from it.
Mm. I like how digital is a means to an end, and it's not the end in itself, the way you,
Yeah.
frame it. And if someone is kind of cognizant of that and they go into this field of, getting the technical skills, but also the humility and understanding that this human connection is really important, what is the instance where you're like, oh my gosh, I love this career? Is it when you kind of interview the patients and they're like, hey, Glenn, this is really amazing. This is really kind of making me feel like I'm getting good care? Is it when the healthcare leaders say like, Glenn, amazing job? Like, when do you feel like, man, this is an amazing job?
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I take a lot of pride in my work. And
Mm,
first and foremost, even if I delivered something that's going to meet a customer's need and I do it well, if it's not something that I am proud of, then I'm usually pretty lackluster about it. I
mm,
think the first thing is to have pride in your work and be self-motivated about what it is that you're bringing back to the tools or the organization, or the organization's goals. So in that, what I experience as the big like moments for me that happen more often than not is, when there is a problem that somebody is facing,
mm,
and and I don't necessarily just say, "Oh, here's your problem. Let me give you a solution." Generally, what I do is I work through that problem with the person, and I think about it, and they challenge them to think about it differently because people don't know the world of data like I do, and that's where I'm adding them value. But after going through that process and our minds kind of meld together to be able to go away into my dark lab in my computer, kind of craft something up that I look at and I say, wow, that's really cool. That is
mm,
number one, a new skill set that I didn't have before that I applied toward this problem. Number
mm.
two, it's an eloquent solution. It's not really about showing Glenn's peacock feathers. It's actually meeting the need of the problem.
Yeah,
And number three, it's about delivering that piece of me, a piece of my own development and growth back towards a need that somebody has. Like
mm,
that's the perfect world. And
yeah,
when I'm able to grow from my work, and I'm also able to say, hey, I made a new personal record and this time around the lab. That's awesome, right? And
yeah, yeah,
I try not to look at Joe and see that he's already doing two laps around me. That's irrelevant, right?
yeah, yeah,
But then also give it back to somebody and they say, wow, you just gave me 10 hours back to spend with my family because I've been doing it in Excel sheets and all that other stuff. Or I have just increased access for mammographies for all the people in Northern Washington. To me, that's just like, wow, there's nothing more cool than that. Not only did I grow from this opportunity, but
yeah.
I also opened the door and helped somebody. And that's what it's really all about.
Glenn, I feel like you're like a brother from another mother because like I completely relate to you, like this desire to grow and to have impact and simultaneously express myself while doing that. Like
Yeah.
I totally get that. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I just want to say, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Great, man. Yeah.
Um, well, one thing I kind of want to transition here into the pathways, like the steps one can take when
Yeah.
trying to pursue your career. Um, I guess my first question it would be, you know, were there any instances where you had to overcome or experience discrimination when pursuing this path of data analytics? So, for me, I was and still am per diem like a nursing assistant, and sometimes I'm like, if my skin color was different, would I be treated differently? Like I sometimes think about that.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm
Yeah.
curious, have you had anything like that, or it's been pretty smooth and your leadership has been good and stuff?
Yeah, Joe, it's real. It's real, man. We have a real challenge to work against and work with. For me, what I've learned is that this world has been created to serve the needs of a select few people. And so I'm not alone in the way that I've been discriminated or biased against. And I feel like that's a constant thing. What's difficult for me is actually pinpoint when it's happening or how much of it is just me just being weird, right? What I'm learning is that it actually happens more often than I'm allowing myself to admit. When I
Mhm.
was growing up, my grandma sat us around a Thanksgiving table, and she was telling us how important, because we were African American, that we had to put in extra time. We had to be faster, we had to be better, we had to be smarter. And that's really stuck with me. I remember somebody actually took a picture of that, and my face was red, and you could see my fist like this because of the injustice of it.
Yeah.
And that's something I've actually fought against my whole life. It's something I just didn't want to accept.
Mm,
As I'm getting older, I'm beginning to realize that this is not only real, that this isn't something that I can necessarily change because I want it to change. That's something that we need to work together to change. It's not because I don't like it, and therefore I could just opt out or opt in. It's just a part of our life, right?
Yeah, right.
Um, but with that said, what I'm also realizing is that things are slowly but surely beginning to move in the right direction, but it's only coming back down to people like me and you, Joe, who are willing and to put in the effort, the time, and the emotional discomfort to start making the change that we want to see in the future.
Mhm.
We really have to stop looking out and saying they're doing this to me or they're doing this to me, and start looking within and saying, what is it that I need to do to represent myself in a way that is consistent with my values, my principles, and being authentic to who I am. And that takes a lot of bravery, and it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of soul searching to be able to just represent who you are and not be ashamed of that. And then to also take the hits because they're inevitably going to come, but look at yourself and say, but that's not me. That's more about them than it is about me. This is what I need to do. Let me bring this to a new level. And I believe if we're consistently doing that over time, we're going to end up getting to where we need to be. But the worst thing that we could do is either um, just not show up or to start blaming others for where we're at in our lives. I think we need to take a lot of responsibility for who we are and do the best that we can with what we're working with, but also start focusing on making those changes systematically anytime the opportunity comes up.
I mean, I don't want to say anything else because I thought that was amazing. But I think what I hear from that is, you know, on an individual level, don't take things too personally. I mean, it is personal, but at the end of the day, like trying to make sure that myself, Joe, can do what I need to do and give the best that I can, but also thinking about collaborating with others to kind of make sure that things that I can't do on an individual level, I can work with others and kind of make more big change. So I feel like what I'm hearing is like a two-pronged approach towards this. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and I can't overemphasize enough the importance of community and surrounding yourself with people that think like you, that look like you, that talk like you, because and ultimately we need to be able to we need to have an identity with somebody that is like us. That
Mhm.
is what makes us feel comfortable as human beings. And as we're going out into the world and we're recognizing that we're going into a completely different world and we're getting arrows shot at us for looking or talking differently, we need to be able to come back and normalize with other people that are not only experiencing those things, but people that we could see ourselves in. It's really important for our own mental health. And ultimately, I think we're going to be able to make it so much further by having a strong focus on community as a part of our own development going forward. And we could only get there together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Really, I appreciate your answer on community. I used to do some community organizing a few years back, so I totally relate.
Yeah.
Um, well, kind of with that context in mind of students understanding that it's important to have community to kind of be so you can actually overcome the challenges that you might face, but also recognizing that there's a lot of fun and cool stuff in data analytics. And I'm
Well,
curious
certainly.
on what does one need to do? Like, let's say I am a high school student at a high school in, Washington State, and I'm like, I want to be like Glenn. Do I need to go to college, Glenn? Can I go with certificates? Do I just call you up and like, hey Glenn, help me out? What should what should I do to get to where you are?
Yeah, certainly. Well, first and foremost, if you want to be like me, I would say no, be like you, because that's who I am being, right? I am being me. And I think it's first and most important for us to realize who we are. And then after we understand, I know as we're young, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it absolutely doesn't. But the time and effort that we do put into that in our high school years and early college years of really discovering what makes us tick, I think that is actually the stream, the trail that we need to follow in our own development. If then one thing that I use to say to help me understand things about myself is, how do I feel when I'm exposed to certain things? So if you're exposed to data and analytics and you're starting to get a little giddy, and then, but the guy next to you is just like, oh my God, he's asleep. Yeah, that might be an indicator that there's something about you that you should look into here, because there could be some opportunity there,
Mm,
right? And so because it's in the differences that we really understand who we are. And with data and analytics, that's something we're starting to navigate towards, and feel like this is a good representation of who I am, that I actually get fulfillment and joy out of doing data and analytics. Then the
mm,
next thing that you could do is certainly get into college. Depending on how hardcore you want to go, you could go like a computer science direction. And I
mm,
find that people that do computer science in undergrad have a pretty broad skill set of a lot of the emerging platforms that
mm,
make people good at what they're doing in more advanced professional areas. Or you could hone in on specific areas like public health and that type of stuff, and then start applying data and analytics to that interest. So
mm,
really, as we continue to grow, really what we're doing is not necessarily taking one interest and focusing on that alone. It's
mm,
actually a lot of different interests, and it's up to us to create the environment that is going to bring us pleasure and meaning in our lives. And so I like to help people, and I like data and analytics, and I like this other thing. And so it's a process of bringing them together. But in order to do that, we have to get experience to realize what it is that we really like and what parts of it we don't like, and to leave behind. And we're constantly reworking and reformatting and re-changing our directory to try to optimize how much things we like to do, and try to minimize the things that we don't like to do. And that's perfectly okay. That's actually what we need to be doing. What I
mhm,
would recommend is don't go for something because you feel like it's what you should do, or because it's, this person says that it's the right way to go, or this person's got a really great smile, I wonder if I could be a YouTuber as well, or something like that. That's really not the right way to go. It's more about, what is it that I respond to? What is that I get excited about? And then how can I continue to evolve, or experience more of that, and then start bringing those different opportunities to experience more of it, whether it's in education and skills, or getting a mentor, or going to a workshop. Anything that you could do is better than nothing. So it's always about the experience, get exposure, and really pursue what your interests are, and continue to learn more about yourself through the process, rather than succumbing to the temptation of just grabbing a a box off of the shelf and putting it on your resume, because I think that's where people find themselves trapped 10 years into their education and really feeling no purpose and direction, is because they haven't had the opportunity to really see how the world could meet them, and how they could meet the world. So
mm.
don't try to put yourself in a box, but it also takes a lot of work, and you got to be pretty brave to consistently try to synthesize the things in this world for you, for what your interests are.
Mm,
Yeah, but take responsibility. I think that's the key thing. And then next after that, start getting that education if that's going to bring you closer to it. Get that mentor if you believe that they're going to help you. One thing that I really underestimated is the goodwill of people. If you find somebody that says that they have an open mind to supporting you along the way, take it. Every significant change in my life has occurred because there's somebody that was willing to work with me to help me get there, because
mm.
it was just too big of a leap for me to be able to find my own way with the world that I was living in. It was pretty small. So it's other people that help us become the best versions of ourselves, and we can't just go to a online curriculum and think that it's going to make a significant impact on who we are.
Thanks, Glenn. And I hear this perpetual theme of like it's about the people,
Yeah,
whether that be through your work and also your development. And I
yeah,
think what I'm hearing is yes, college for data analytics, if that is truly something that makes you tick, then that's a good consideration to have. And what's news to me is it doesn't have to be the computer science technical degrees, but it can also be the non-computer science degrees as well,
oh
because
yeah,
those are the things that can actually lead you into a more niche or interesting field for you personally. And
yeah.
so that's really helpful to know. And did you have any other thoughts about kind of the career path that you wanted to add, or do you feel like that kind of captures everything?
That pretty much captures it. I mean, my general belief about it is, as long as we're moving in a certain direction, actually doing something different from day to day, we're going to get to where we're going.
Mm.
It may not be the most efficient path, but it's movement. The moment that or we're not experiencing and growing in one way or the other, that's the time when I would say it's time to look at yourself and see if you could do something different. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're at the, kind of end of our conversation here. Do you want to kind of end with that, with like keep moving, folks, or did you have any other imparting thoughts, or the wisdom that you wanted to share to the viewers?
Yeah, I think ultimately just believe in yourself, trust yourself. If we're consistently looking out to the rest of the world to define who we are or to give us the answers, we're really missing the opportunity for a very intimate and meaningful life on this planet, which could only be defined by ourselves, right? So it takes a lot of courage, but really constantly looking inward, saying, what is it that I respond to in the outside world and start maneuvering that direction. If we're able to take responsibility of ourselves at that level, you're going to end up living a happy life, regardless of the circumstances, for sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, live your life, everybody.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Glenn, thank you so much for
Yeah.
this conversation. I really appreciate it. I know we all do appreciate it, so thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. It was a pleasure. And if there's anything I could do for you or help or anybody else, please let me know. Yeah.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you.